10x your service design offering with Smaply. Take 20% off any order with This Is HCD 20 off. Let's superpower you and your design team's potential. Sign up at smaply.app. Enjoy the episode from your friends at Smaply, helping support This Is HCD podcast.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Bringing Design Closer. My name is Gerry Scullion and I'm a service designer and the founder of This Is HCD and the CEO of thisisdoing.com, where we provide live online design and innovation classes providing training for people within the design and change-making space. We also have our new Doing Design Festival series with the next event on June the 18th with the theme of Doing Design Online, which is something very much applicable to the world that we're in at the moment. So for more information, see the doingdesignfestival.com. Today in the show, we have Shane Waring from Dublin City Council and founder of Dublin City BETA. Myself, as a local to Dublin, I'm really excited about this wonderful initiative that is focused on making Dublin City more livable through service experimentation. We speak with Shane about the process behind the scenes of what makes this initiative different to typical initiatives, say in normal councils or governments. We learn more around the background to some of Shane's work and go deeper into what the benefits are for councils to approach this mindset of rapid service experimentation. Let's get into it. Shane, how's it going? How are you?
I'm good, Gerry. Yeah, how's things?
I'm not so bad. It's kind of a pretty cold day in Dublin, which I don't like too much. But I'm excited to speak with you. I've been speaking with you for, it seems like, a couple of years, trying to get you on this podcast to talk about the wonderful work that you do. But maybe let's start off, Shane. Tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do at Dublin City Council.
I started in Dublin City Council back in 2001. So just after kind of finishing college, did a bit of travelling, usual kind of thing, and then started in 2001. And I was based in our city architects, so studied architecture in university, and so worked there for years. And then I took a career break, and during that time, I worked in a private architect's office, ecological architecture, and I also, with two other lads, set up Go-Car car sharing.
Oh yeah, Go-Car.
Yeah, it was Ireland's first car sharing company, and
presumably it still is the first one.
Still is the first one. There's a second operator now in Ireland, which is actually great to see.
Yeah.
And in many ways, actually having a second operator is good for both of them because lots of reasons. But then I went back to the city council and I was in city architects, and then a few years later was seconded onto a project called Designing Dublin.
Mm-hmm.
And basically it was a transdisciplinary team, members from the council, other people from outside, and we used various design thinking methods to basically take a different approach, how to explore what kind of people wanted for their city.
Yeah.
And also to explore maybe different solutions and so on.
Yeah.
And then I went back to the council again. And out of kind of all those different experiences, including my experience working in city architects, I realized that as a city and as an organization, we needed a better way to introduce change.
So the name of the sort of section of Dublin City Council that you've founded and lead is called Dublin City BETA. And when I returned from Australia, I heard about this thing. I was like, this kind of breakaway, new way of thinking for a city to sort of reimagine what it might be like in the future. Is that a fair kind of assumption of what Dublin City BETA is based on? Or how would you describe it?
Well, okay, I'll give you, what's the phrase? I didn't have time to write a short letter, so I'll write you a long one. Where it came from was, I live in the city centre in Dublin, and I wanted to stay living in the city centre even after we had kids. And whereas actually often people have kids and they immediately kind of assume they need to move out of the city. And so for that, I reckoned we needed a better way to improve the city much, much faster. Because a kid's childhood is over in 10 years. So that was what gave me my driving force to set it up. It is also still, I guess, in many ways, my driving force. How can I improve the city that my two kids live in much more rapidly?
So the work that BETA does encompasses lots of the stuff that a typical council might be responsible for, such as roads and management and waste management and lots of areas, everything that encompasses a typical council structure. And I know some of the work that you've been doing and have been involved in since BETA's inception, but how does this differ typically to, say, what an organisation like a council might typically just do?
Well, the phrase I like to say is, I want us to have a way to think big, start small, and move much faster. So how can we think about the Dublin of 100 years' time? So the World Health Organization has said that kids born since 2015, chances are they'll live to be about 100 in the Western world. I'm sure there's lots of terms and conditions with that. But equally, a childhood is over very rapidly. How can we think about the Dublin of 100 years' time, but actually seek to start to improve it in the next few weeks? Really, really rapidly, and how can we, move much faster? How can we, start learning much faster, and how can we start delivering much faster?
Yeah.
So I guess traditionally the organization would traditionally use a much more of what's called a waterfall approach.
Yeah.
So you try it and think everything out and perfect everything, and then roll it out or deliver it. Whereas what I seek to do is try to get us as an organization to start small. So I tend to say, if we were to do this in 2 weeks' time, what could we do?
Yeah.
And that just as a mindset starts to change how people think.
Yeah.
So I often say, as organizations in Ireland, or maybe people in general, people are quite good at thinking in the medium term. So maybe people can kind of think about 5 or 10 years' time. People struggle to think about what they can do in 2 weeks' time and struggle to think about 100 years' time. They struggle to think on those two different scales.
Okay. I know one of the initiatives that BETA has been involved in is one of my children's favourites. And it was one of the reasons why I think we originally connected all those years ago when I returned from Australia. And it was the Dublin City Canvas. Talk to me a little bit around where this idea came from and maybe describe it for our listeners as well.
So when I was setting up DCC BETA, I was on the lookout. The way I wanted to develop it was I wanted to figure out what did we need as an innovation ecosystem? What did we need internally as an organization? What do we need to solve to enable us to do projects? And the way I wanted to do that was to try and actually deliver a project and use that project to figure out what kind of blockages did I hit and what were the friction points and so on, and then try to solve them. So the first project that I started with was the one that you're referring to. So every time you see a traffic light somewhere in the city, somewhere nearby it, you'll see a big grey box, and that basically is the control center for that traffic light.
Okay.
And they're basically big blank space. And so often they get graffitied and tagged, stickered and so on. So as a city council, we had basically two solutions or two ways to approach that. Either we can keep repainting them grey regularly, or we can just leave them.
Yeah.
So either we can keep spending money and resources and keep repainting them grey, or we can just let them sit and start to look. Probably people often find them quite ugly.
Yeah. So
that first project was looking at if we let ourselves get out of the way and a piece of art on that box, would the boxes look better, and would it solve a maintenance issue as well? Perhaps people wouldn't tag them and so on. So that was really trialed on 11 boxes, cost £1,100.
1,000 to 1,100 euros, was it?
Exactly, yeah. €1,100. And it was in place for 18 months. So after about 6 months, we knew it seemed to have worked, and we left it in place for the further 12 months to see how long it would paint last.
Can I just stop you there? And when you seen that it worked, what were the kind of criteria and the metrics that were used to kind of say, well, that works? Or was there anything as kind of scientific behind that? Like, or was it just a case of, it looks good, it's working?
Yeah, so beta projects are split across 3 different stages. The first stage is a concept stage trial, then a scaling stage, and then a local stage. So that starts off as a concept. So as a concept, you're trying to decide if something seems to be a good idea. So is painting art on a box, does that seem to be a good idea? For that, you're looking at things like, well, what's the perception of people about the thing? That could be local residents, or it could be local businesses, it could be tourists, and so on.
Okay.
It's also things like negative interactions. So did it solve what it was hoping to solve? Did it reduce either people tagging those boxes, or did it reduce us feeling the need to repaint the box?
Yeah.
So even if some small amounts of small levels of graffiti still appeared, maybe it didn't matter, as it was kind of camouflaged. So the amount of maintenance that we had to do in those boxes during that time. Also, you can then just tap into some expert opinions. So, for example, we would have public domain officers. We'd have officers who are in charge of a particular area of the city. What do they feel? Do they feel it solved the issue? Do they feel residents liked it or not? Just from generally going about their day to day and from what they see. So they are literally out in the streets a lot. So those sorts of things. So there was photographs taken of all the boxes before and during, and then all concept stage trials get removed at the end.
Yeah.
And that's done for various reasons. But, so again, you could see at the end of that trial, the 11 boxes were repainted grey after the 18 months. So they returned back and you could see the issue reappeared within 2 months again.
Okay.
On the boxes.
That's interesting. You returned it back to its original state and then monitored it.
Yes. And
to give people listening here, like some examples of what I'm talking about here, like some of them are really creative. We've got an RTD2. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. Some Star Wars fans are probably, you got it wrong, Gerry.
R2D2.
R2D2. Yeah, okay, fair enough. I'm not a Star Wars fan. I've watched them and I appreciate them, but I'm not a Star Wars geek. But there's one of those locally to me as well, which always gets the kids kind of like, look, Daddy, it's a robot. I'm like, well, technically it's not a robot, it's an android. But we won't get into that. And then there's another one.
He was.
I don't know who he was. He's a politician. The other one is like a fox that's really beautifully designed. It's like and it says, the importance of watching when you're crossing the road and listening and all that kind of stuff. So they're not just painted with, murals and stuff. Some of them probably are, but they're really creative and they provide canvas and a platform for local artists to showcase their talents. I think that's how my understanding is of it. Is that fair to say, Shane?
Yeah, in general, they're open to anyone in the community. So someday, for example, I'm hoping to paint one myself.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I might just wait a couple of years until I have a bit more time when the kids are a bit more grown up. But so in theory, it's open to anyone. And one of the things, when you think of a traffic light, often a traffic light is near a pedestrian crossing or something like that. So actually, quite often they are beside where a pedestrian crossing is. So people are standing there waiting for a minute or something to cross the road. So, or perhaps people are waiting in their car near the traffic light. And so often they're actually quite visible.
Did you ever get any brands asking, not brands, but like businesses, like kind of use it? Really? Yeah. So, how do you manage that? Because that's interesting. You might get a local shop saying, well, I'd like to do it. And at the bottom, sponsored by Centra or something like that.
So at the start, the decision is, that's not what it's about. It's not advertising. It's about adding little sparks of joy around the city. And I mean, in theory, you could probably have a sponsor of the overall platform, of the Dublin Canvas platform, but we haven't gone down that line yet. And at the moment, we don't feel a need to. It can actually just exist for its own sake. That was the first project. And by doing that, I learned an awful lot about how to deliver a project. So, for example, that needed €1,100, which is a really, really small amount of money. But when you're looking for it, how do you get it?
Yeah.
And when you are looking for small amounts of money, immediately then, for example, a manager, naturally enough, will start saying, well, what is this for? And how, do you have all the right permissions? And have you asked those people? And have you asked those people? And so from an innovation ecosystem perspective, even simple things like that can actually start to slow down projects. But that project was the first project, and it hugely helped develop the DCC BETA concept.
Yeah.
And it has actually since now, so the Dublin region is split into 4 local authorities, and it has actually spread to all 4.
Okay.
So I think it's now at something like 500 boxes.
Okay, it's amazing, like, because for people who aren't familiar with Dublin, like there's people within the kind of CBD or the central, sort of business district is run by Dublin City Council. And then there's lots of other councils that kind of intersect with it, like Fingal County, Dunleary Rathdown is another one.
And South Dublin.
And South Dublin as well. So that's why when you drive around the city in Dublin, you see all these wonderful boxes. It's called Dublin City Canvas. Is that right?
Dublin Canvas.
DublinCanvas.com. How do people find out more about that? I want to click on it and have a look.
So DublinCanvas.com, I guess, would be the best place to see something about it, or in general to see any of the beta projects. They can see dccbeta.ie.
Yeah, we'll put a link in that one into the show notes.
Yeah.
So Shane, what does it look like in terms of scaling beta? Like, what's your vision for the future? Is it something that for Dublin City Council to look at and learn about new ways of working and new ways of incorporating and thinking about ideas? Walk me through, what does that look like in your mind?
What the future might be?
Yeah.
So I guess the key metric for me is, have we improved the livability of Dublin City, and really rapidly? That's the key metric. How to get to that? I mean, Beta doesn't really talk about it, but all projects are design-led and evidence-based. So it doesn't really talk about that because it's a little bit technical, but in a way, in people's perspectives, I prefer for them to see projects that they seem to like and agree with, and subtly just get them used to beta projects being carried out a certain way. So, for example, every trial will always have a sign-off telling them that it's a trial and seeking feedback. And all concept stage trials will always be removed. They are always reversed at the end of them. There's always a report produced at the end. Projects always follow a certain couple of steps. So, without going into it too much with the public, I prefer to kind of just subtly do that each time, and they will just get used to. They begin to just trust it as a brand.
Yeah,
I sort of see it as a Trojan mouse. So
I like that, a Trojan mouse.
Yeah, she's starting off really small. I mean, I began this as 10% of my week.
Yeah,
when I began this in City Architects, it was 10% of my week. It's now my full-time role, and I've changed sections within the City Council. But so it began as a Trojan mouse, and it wasn't originally about trying to make us a design-led organization and so on. It was about the projects themselves. The focus was on the projects, and then the back end is hopefully a certain amount of culture change.
Yeah.
And so I began this 9 years ago, which blows my mind a little bit to think about it. But I began it 9 years ago, and I can even see a sea change in how we even think about trialing and evidence and so on as a city.
Yeah.
So 9 years ago, beta was sort of a bit crazy 9 years ago. Whereas now it actually seems fairly normal.
Yeah.
And part of that is just from being subtly there in the background, just getting just that culture change in the background. And because of COVID, for example, at the moment, there's all sorts of pop-up solutions and so on happening in the city. And I think that's an entirely different culture and mindset from where we were 9 years ago.
Yeah. The way I see it, and you correct me if I'm wrong, is it's very much like an experimentation piece within a design process. So like they're prototypes, service prototypes for the city to experiment what works, and is there a desirability, and much is it going to cost? Is this a better way of doing things? And it's wonderful to see that, and that's something why I'm so passionate about Dublin City Council. And it's one of the reasons why I was so keen to speak to you, because a lot of councils around the world tend to just stick to what's safe and they're afraid of risk and experimentation. So when I saw this, when I returned from Australia, I was like, this is brilliant. Like all these super initiatives. And we actually collaborated on one initiative, maybe it's a year or two ago. I'm trying to think of how old my baby is now, because it was around that time, 2 years ago. When I returned, I noticed there was loads of people cycling. And it's brilliant to see. Like Dublin, when I was growing up, it wasn't really that safe to cycle in the city. And there was a number of times where our wonderful police force pulled me over and gave me raps on the knuckles for cycling kind of recklessly through the city. I'm like, but it wasn't recklessly. I was cycling in what should have been a bike lane. One of the problems that I had as a student, I was living in small houses at the time, storing my bike, and I had nowhere to store it. And wherever I rented, I usually would get the landlord given out to me for putting my bike in the hole or damaging the whole wallpaper and stuff. So whenever we spoke, about this idea called bike bunkers, it was something I was like, hey, this could be something that would be really interesting. So maybe tell the listeners a little bit about bike bunkers as a project and where the idea and the project came from.
I think, to be honest, Gerry, when you were cycling down the road with the police pulling you over, you were doing wheelies, weren't you?
Do you know what? As I was saying,
with your cap on sideways.
One of the times I was cycling through Temple Bar, and I was like, okay, fair enough, that's justified. But the other time was just cycling down Dame Street in the middle of the city, and they were like, they just didn't like the look of me. That's what I said.
I wouldn't blame them though.
Yeah, fair enough. Point made, point taken, on board. Well, maybe talk to me a little bit more around bike bunkers.
So again, part of this was one of the previous projects was the Dublin Canvas project. It was about art on boxes and so on. I was partly on the lookout for a project that I could explore that was perhaps much more serious, for want of a better phrase, or much more perhaps would link with one of our more engineering-led departments.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, I was living in what you'd call a 2-up, 2-down house, like one of those old terraced houses, and I had that issue that you're describing myself. Mm-hmm. So my bike would lean against the wall just inside the front door. It's in your way. You fall over it every time you're trying to get in the door or out the door. It marks the walls and so on. So your choices are either to leave it there or you leave it out on the public street and lock it to a pole where it's much more likely to get damaged and or stolen. It also gets in the way of people trying to get past. It can often be a trip hazard for people with visual disabilities and so on. Or else you put it out your tiny backyard, and so it takes up, you'll have a very limited amount of outdoor space, and now it starts to take up a good chunk of it. And also now it starts to get a bit more awkward to ever get back out again, and so you cycle less. So on one hand, as a city council, we are trying to encourage people to live in the city centre, and we're also trying to encourage cycling. So at the moment, those two things are slightly fighting against each other sometimes. If you live in an apartment, where do you put it? Maybe, depending on how modern your apartment block is, it might or might not have somewhere decent for the bike. Also, in various places where people are living, so for example, it sounds a little bit like maybe where you were living, putting it in the stairwell can actually be a fire hazard. People are trying to get out in a fire, and the electricity has gone in your house, it's nighttime, and you have 20 people all trying to get out of a single door, and you have all these bikes in the way. Mm-hmm. So that project was one bike hanger. So a bike hanger is, I guess you'd call it like a metal box. They're kind of, if you look them side on, they're semicircle. Mm-hmm. And the lid lifts on them, and it's like a shared space inside. Maybe 6 bikes go inside it, and there's a bike rack inside, and you lock up your bike inside, and then you put the lid back down, and you lock the lid as well. It's like doubly protected. It's out of the weather. It's extra secure, and so on.
Yeah.
So that bike hanger project was, one of those was trialed on the street for about 5 months, cost €4,500, and again was measured. Again, 6 residents nearby all took part, gave us their feedback, and so on.
Yeah.
And that project is now getting scaled up under the brand or under the name Bike Bunkers.
Yeah.
And that has now, at the moment, that's going through a tender to enable us to buy a really large quantity of bike hangers.
Great.
To roll out across the city.
Yeah. But what I really like about this is there's been a need that has been identified. And I know you mentioned there about your own personal story, and it's something like from a design process. Typically, there's a need identified through research, as opposed to like that bias of the self-identification of the problem. But what I really like about it is it's not just thinking about making Dublin a bike safe and bike city centric city, of thinking of just putting in the bike lanes and that's it, it's done. It's taking the whole kind of holistic approach of like, where do you store the bike? What does the journey look like from beginning to end? Where are they going to be located? How are they administered? How are they serviced? How are they maintained? You know, that was something that we sort of really took a really hard look at in terms of who's going to be responsible for this within the organization at the moment, and having a sponsor to really dedicate their time to maintain this. So walk me through what that looks like. And we're going into a bit more granularity here in terms of organizational structure. But I remember when we were working on it, we were like, well, Shane's time is finite and it's not possible for Shane to start a new initiative and then manage it. What does it look like in terms of getting people within Dublin City Council excited about these initiatives and then passing the responsibility on?
So beta projects follow 3 stages. The first stage is concept stage, and that is like, should we do this?
Yeah.
The second stage is scaling, and that is, how can we do it, or how should we do it? And the third stage is, where should we do it? Bike bunkers originally was trialed, so that was a concept stage trial, and now it has moved forward into the second stage, so scaling. So it is trying to figure out all that back end, one of a better phrase, business model aspects that you're just discussing there. So that is things like, well, for a trial of one of them, maybe you don't need planning permission, but if you're going to put out 1,000 of them, do you need planning permission, or do you need other aspects like that? Who is going to fund this? What section is going to run it? Are there any legal issues we need to be looking at? And so on. So also that's the stage. It's after the second stage is when something gets its name, or maybe gets a brand. So, for example, at the start it was Bike Hanger Beta, and now it's Bike Bunkers.
Yeah.
So, and one of the reasons for taking those 3 stages is the second stage of scaling is often a huge chunk of work. There's no point doing all that work until you actually know something seems to be a good idea that actually people want it. So take that original trial. I mean, the assumption there was that this was a great idea and people were going to love it and use it and so on. But we could have easily found out that maybe some of those residents put their bike in it and maybe ends up very rarely using it. And they could have said to us, we thought it was going to be a nice idea. So honestly, the hallways was much handier and I didn't use it.
Yeah.
But we found they all loved it. And so we've moved on to the scaling stage. So part of that is like, one way to think about it would be, take our chief executive. Who is it that he should be, what executive manager should he be asking for an update on that project?
Yeah.
Who's the natural owner for that as a service? And so little questions like that start to help you figure out where this thing should sit within the organization.
That's nice. I like that. One of the things that I noticed when we were working together on that initiative was the level of communication on social media that you were handling around validation and getting feedback, which I thought was really nice. It's kind of how you'd imagine the corporations and the councils and the governments of the future working. So walk me through around the interactions that you were getting and how you validate these ideas and get the feedback, because you've got a very active and engaged Twitter following that if you put anything up, I'm always blown away by some of the comments and feedbacks that you get.
So feedback from people is amazing. It's amazing. And I don't mean it's amazing as in it's always positive. What I mean is it's amazing how people are willing to give you the feedback that you're saying, are also willing to maybe tell you of experiences that they've had or solutions that they've seen in other places that they've lived and so on. One of the benefits of beta from its inception has been actually that it's been so lean. So, for example, with me at 10% of my week, it forced me to, I didn't have a huge team that I could say, okay, let's go research this.
Yeah.
It forces you to think differently. It forces you to say, actually, let's work as a collective, as a city, and actually discuss this. And so projects might follow a few different stages. Even before it's a project, maybe there's just general conversations, for example, on social media, and there's no commitment, there's no project written up on anywhere, and you're just learning a little bit in advance. Then maybe it becomes a project, and you might ask people are giving you really early feedback, but also maybe you're looking for a trial location. So you're saying, these are the criteria for where the kind of place that we need to trial this. And what you're looking for is kind of like a Goldilocks location. You don't want somewhere that's like perfect, nor do you want somewhere that has huge issues around the thing that you're trying to solve, because actually it'd be too difficult, it'd be too hot to try and actually solve.
Yeah.
So you're trying to pick a Goldilocks location. So you give people those kind of criteria, and then people will come back and suggest maybe their street or whatever it is. That works in a couple of different ways. It starts to give you from the start that you're interested. It gives you a way in to trial something somewhere, but also it starts to give you a sense of the level of demand. For example, did everyone maybe only apply within really close to the city centre, or were they all over the whole city? So it starts to give you a sense of how much demand there is for this potentially as a solution. And then people feedback in different ways. There's Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. There's comments on the website itself. There's emails. So they feedback in lots of different ways. And I guess you just have to be clear in advance what it is you're trying to learn. So before you even do your trial, you know what your assumptions are, and you're trying to either validate those or not. So I think you have to interrogate when people give you feedback. You maybe have to read it and actually properly read it and give them feedback, interrogate it, ask them why.
Yeah.
People might say, I don't like that. And you ask why, and they say they don't like the appearance and so on. And so you start to get the underlying issues that maybe you need to explore further as a city.
Yeah. Shane, we're coming towards the end of this conversation, but I just want to ask one or two more things. Like, as regards new initiatives and new ideas, is this possible that for people on Twitter and people within Dublin City to suggest new things? Because that's where I get really excited about when people from the public are able to actually be kind of co-design and they're working within the system as well. Walk me through where you're at with that.
So on the website, there is a suggest link for people to suggest a project. So they fill in various fields in that suggest link. And one of the reasons is that it splits their suggestion into two parts. It asks them what is the problem that they're trying to solve. Because people will often jump straight ahead to the solution, give you the solution that they want to see. I want to see bike hangers.
No way, really? People do that?
But if you ask them, if you force them, if you have a box there where you're asking, well, what's the problem that you're actually trying to solve for you? It forces them to explain that bit. Whereas actually often they won't. They just assume that's known, that's understood. That works in a couple of different ways. One is it helps you understand a little bit more what they're trying to solve. But also, maybe the solution that they propose isn't, maybe there's lots of reasons why it could be very difficult to do or something or other. But probably the problem that they are mentioning or the opportunity that they're mentioning, probably that's absolutely and utterly valid. And if you look through all the different suggestions, you might see a whole pile of people mentioning the same problem. And maybe a lot of them mention the same solution also. But in some ways, you might have lots of different ways you can solve that same problem. So by splitting it out that way, it's really useful. So anyone can make a suggestion. And that same link is what is there for staff or for citizens or for myself. If I think of things, that's where I, myself, add suggestions to myself, if you know what I mean.
Do you get feedback from yourself as well?
So, I mean, I'm just a resident. So when I'm doing that, I'm just a resident in the city. So when you're adding one, it's asking who are you? Are you a staff member? Are you a resident? So sometimes I'm doing it just as a resident. Other times I'm doing it as a staff member. I've seen something that we should actually be solving as a city council. And periodically then they all get prioritized according to, there is around 30 criteria that we prioritize them all against. And it takes on average about 8 minutes per suggestion. Okay. And roughly kind of whatever is up at the top of the list is then what you pick your next project from. So maybe something like 600 suggestions so far to date. So a lot of them will overlap, but maybe you look at the top 20 and you pick what you're going to work on next.
Yeah, nice. Shane, is there anything else you want to call out before we wrap up this episode? Is there anything you want to shout out or any kind of initiatives that you're working on you might want to have a shout out to the audience for?
So I would love if people know of other initiatives that I could learn from. I would love them to get in touch. Yeah. So BETA at dublincity.ie.
Great. I'll put that in the show notes.
Yep. And I would really, really love to I'd love to be able to learn further from other cities around the world. And I was delighted yesterday, another local authority in Dublin, so Dunleary Rathdown, yesterday they launched DLR BETA. So they are now taking on the same initiative, the same approach. So I'm really, really, really looking forward to seeing where that goes.
That's really positive to see, like, other councils adopting the ways of thinking and the ways of approaching these things. So kudos to you, Shane. And before we wrap up, keep up the great work. I'm a Dublin City resident. I love seeing these initiatives kick off, and I know lots of my peers in Dublin as well really celebrate the work that you do. So thank you so much for your time and your effort doing that.
Thanks a million, Gerry, and listen, thanks a million for inviting me on this morning.
No worries. Thanks, Shane. So there you have it. That's all for this episode of Bringing Design Closer. If you like this episode, feel free to visit thisishcd.com, where you can access our back catalogue of over 100 episodes, with episodes related to service design, product management, design research, and much, much more. Now, if you're interested in design and innovation training, feel free to check out our business, thisisdoing.com, where you can join online classrooms and learn from the world's best design and innovation leaders. Join the This Is HCD newsletter, where you'll receive updates from the network, and also, if you're interested, apply to join the Slack community on thisishcd.com. Stay safe, and until next time, take care.